Okay, this is video 901 and this is on cellular respiration. Okay. So one thing that you may have noticed is that when you're hungry you feel weak. Well, this is because your body needs energy. And the way you get energy is that you eat food. Now, how does your body take this food and convert it into a form that your cells can use for energy? So we know that organisms get energy from food. So for instance, we have this organism here that's getting ready to eat a flower, and we know that in plants there's glucose. Well, how does that glucose get into your cells, and how do your cells convert it into energy? Well, we know that energy is produced in the mitochondria, and here in the mitochondria there are various places that things happen. So we have what's called the outer membrane, we have the inner membrane, here's the inner membrane, the intermembrane space, and then we also have the matrix. And another important area we have are the folds, which are called the cristae. I want to stop here and label your mitochondria picture that you have. So why are the membranes folded? Okay. Well, it helps with the structure. There are a lot of things going on inside the mitochondria, and in order for those things to happen, and in order for there to be room for all those things to happen, you have to increase the surface area. And that's the main reason, or the main advantage of having these folded structures. So we know that food provides living things with the building blocks they need to grow and reproduce, and that food contains chemical energy, and it's released when the chemical bonds are broken. So food is expressed in units of calories. That's the energy stored in food. In physics, we use calories to measure heat, and we also use it, we use it for energy, heat energy. And then in food, you have calories. And you notice I have a big C here, a capital C. Well, this capital C denotes that it is food calories. And one big C calorie is equal to 1,000 of the calories that you talk about in physics. One food calorie is equal to 7 ATP, or thereabouts. You can also see that a gram of fat is 9 calories, a gram of protein is 4 calories, and a gram of carbohydrates is 4 calories. So for every gram of a carbohydrate, you get about 28 ATP. So we're getting ready to talk about cellular respiration, and that's the process that gives cells their energy. And this equation should look very familiar to you. It's pretty much the complementary equation to photosynthesis. Main difference being that usually we have the light energy here in photosynthesis, but for cellular respiration we put it as a product. So we have 3 stages of cellular respiration. We have glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. Now, if you notice from glycolysis, some of the products go a little bit of everywhere. So the pyruvic acid is what actually goes into the Krebs cycle. There are some electrons that are carried into NADH, or carried in NADH, and these will go into that electron transport chain. So if you notice it says NADH, if you remember from photosynthesis it was NADPH. Here that electron carrier is NAD+. Then we also have some ATP that's produced from glycolysis. The Krebs cycle also produces ATP, and some of its products are NADH and FADH2. So here we have FAD this time in the Krebs cycle. In class, we'll watch this video. So in glycolysis, it's an anaerobic process, meaning that no oxygen required. It breaks down glucose into pyruvic acid, so there's the molecule there. It happens in the cytoplasm. You get about 4 ATP molecules that are made and 2 that are used, so that's why I've got on here a net gain of 2. And then you also have 2 NADH on those electron carriers. Now this pyruvic acid, another name for it is pyruvate, is going to go to the matrix of the mitochondria. And this is where the Krebs cycle occurs. So if oxygen's present, it occurs in the mitochondrial matrix, and then it will pass to the Krebs cycle. And it produces CO2. You see the CO2. Here's some CO2 here. Here's a little bit there. NADH, FADH2, and ATP. You can't really see that because that's at the bottom of the screen. Okay. From there, the products, okay, remember I said earlier that the electron carriers, that's these 2 here, these electron carrier products will go to the electron transport chain. Now obviously we need oxygen here again. It happens on the inner part of the membrane. Those electrons from NADH and FADH2 are released. And each time the hydrogen ion moves across the membrane, you're going to build up, each time the hydrogens that come off the NADH and FADH2 come off, they'll move across the membrane. Now, when they go across the membrane, come back across the membrane, they'll pass through ATP synthase, and then the ATP will be reduced. And there's a final hydrogen in there. And oxygen, that's the aerobic part of it, is going to be the final electron acceptor. And that will produce the H2O. And that's the water that you breathe out when you exhale. Here's a little picture to kind of show you what's going on. So we have our NADHs and FADH2 that are dropping off those electrons. As they drop off electrons, their hydrogens go into the intermembrane space. Then eventually there's a gradient that builds up here, and once there is, these hydrogens will go back through, and when they come through, just like in photosynthesis, ATP will be produced, and we get approximately 34 ATP from this process here. Combined with the other ATP that we produce, we get a net total of about 36. 38 are produced, and about 2 are used, right? And then 34 are your final amount that you get from electron transport, so 36 total. So you can go ahead and take a look at this chart. You might want to stop it, but this is a pretty good summary of everything that goes on and where it goes on. Krebs cycle is in the matrix. Oops. And this is in the inner membrane. Now if you look at photosynthesis and cellular respiration, I mentioned earlier that they were opposite processes or complementary processes. So looking at this, you know that CO2 goes in plants, so that's going to be your photosynthesis. This is going to be your cell respiration. Okay. On a global level, they're also opposites. We know that photosynthesis removes CO2 and that it releases oxygen. And then we know that cellular respiration releases oxygen into the atmosphere and uses oxygen to get the energy. That's why they are complementary processes. Complementary process means the outputs of one are the inputs of the other, or the products of one are reactants of the other. So your cells only contain small amounts of energy, and that's just enough for a few seconds. And most of that energy is produced through lactic acid fermentation, which we'll be talking about in the next video. For long-term energy, you have, which when I say long-term, I mean about 15 minutes worth, your energy is going to come from the glucose that is in glycogen. Then after about 15 minutes, once you pass that, then your energy is going to come from the breakdown of fats. You might want to stop here, and here's a good summary of what happens in each of the 3 stages, as long as oxygen is present. Make sure you're able to answer these questions. And that's about the end of this video.